Hello, it's Davey Mooney coming to you from the University of North Texas, where I run the jazz guitar program. I'm a Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist. Latest record is Way Back. Got 2 Mel Bay books, Into the Labyrinth, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary. And let's see, it's early summer break here in Denton, Texas. It's late May, I think it's May 31st. And yeah, just kind of settling into the summer groove, getting ready to go to Colombia for the first time, do some gigs and workshop there. What else? Actually going to do a new Sunnyside record in New York this summer. Next semester I'm on sabbatical. I'm going to write another book. Got a lot of stuff going on, try to keep swimming, as they say. Keep it all going. And today, I'd like to talk to y'all about something that comes up a lot and that I think about a lot but maybe haven't addressed in any of these videos specifically or in the books. And that's just, technique, and specifically my technique, the way I approach the instrument from a technical perspective. And so I remember I did a jazz guitar departmental about this some years ago. I sort of forget when it was. And with me, it's interesting because I don't want to repeat myself too much with my students, because someone will be here for 4 years. But then a lot of time will go by and I realize I haven't said the thing that I feel like I say a lot in a long time, or I don't remember who I said it to. So, at the risk of repeating myself, I'm trying to harp on these things a little more frequently. And so I did a guitar departmental and talked about technique, and the definition of technique that I came up with was, how well your technique is how well do you execute your ideas. Good technique means you can execute the things that you want to do cleanly and well. Bad technique is, you can't. And I think when I was coming up in the 90s, I thought of technique as how fast can you play, basically. And in New Orleans in the mid 90s, I feel like the goal was like how fast can you play Cherokee, basically. Can you get it to 300? Can you get it above 300? Things like Cherokee, giant steps, and rhythm changes. And it was a trumpet centric kind of school, which was great. I think I got some of my concept of how to articulate things and the very sort of like punchy articulation I have partially from listening to a lot of trumpet players and growing up around trumpet players. But yeah, I used to call it the Trumpet Olympics, where they'd all line up on Cherokee or something and take solos. And it was like how high and how fast can you go? And that was, to me, like that's what I used to practice for technique. And at the time, I was very much a picker, and I guess the most technically accomplished guitarists in my mind at the time were like your Pat Martino, George Benson in New Orleans, Steve Mazikowski, people that could really just like pick stuff at those fast tempos and have that really poppin' articulation. So I started just trying to pick every note. I can't really do it anymore because at some point I realized that there was going to be a limitation for me with the pure pick stuff. Like I wasn't going to play like Benson, I couldn't quite get to those type of tempos and that level of like shreddiness. So at some point I started mixing in more legato things. But I remember specifically, I tell the students here what I used to do was I would get my metronome, and now my metronome is my phone. Of course, I have a little app, but back then I had a handheld metronome, but it was like with a little dial, so you couldn't choose every click, right? It would go. I remember it would go like 92 was right here at 12 o'clock, and it would go like 94, 96, 98, and at a certain point, I remember it was like 112, 116, 120, 126, 132. 138, 144, and so I would practice playing tunes like Cherokee and rhythm changes. Say I would be able to play it comfortably and execute my ideas and play long 8th-note lines at 112, so I would move it to 116, and then I could do it there maybe, move it to 120, and somewhere in there 126, 132, and what I mean by that is I'm thinking of the metronome on like 2 and 4. So this is 120, but I'm not really thinking. I'm not thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm thinking 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And at some point, I would find the tempo where I could do it, and then the next notch up, I couldn't do it, or I felt less comfortable. And at that point, I would analyze like what was going on with my two hands. I think I focus more on the right hand for better or for worse. And I remember thinking that a lot of the time it was that I should start with an up pick instead of a down pick with the real like picky, alternate picking thing I was doing. But that was mostly what I did to analyze like my technique. And again, it was mostly in the interest of trying to play as fast as possible. And 300 was always the goal. So 150 on my metronome was actually 152. So it would have been 304, and then the next was like 160, which was 320, which I still can never get to. But I'll try to demonstrate that. Let me start at this is 112 on this metronome, so 224 if I'm thinking of this as 1 and 3. So if I'm playing something like Cherokee, which hopefully you all know, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So not too much trouble with that. So the next would be like 116. I mean, on this thing I could go to 113, but it was kind of nice to have the notches, because as human beings, I don't think we really think of tempo in terms of singular beats per minute. So this is 116. I think I can still do it. So we'll call this the second A of Cherokee. Okay, 120. We'll go to the bridge. Yeah, I already feel it starts to change, and what I notice, I see some students, first of all, as the tempo gets faster, you have to relax. I mean, the tendency is to like start clenching, and that inhibits your movement. But I notice my right hand, I have very small movements. I almost feel like I'm picking from somewhere from between the knuckle and the tip of the finger. I'm not moving the whole arm. And I do anchor a bit over here, I think sometimes. And I'm kind of picking in here somewhere. And especially as the tempo gets faster. Excuse me. All right, 126. So this is the half note 126. So we're thinking like 250, 252. So the last day of Cherokee. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 132. I used to sit and do this all day, y'all. Now this is where it starts to get a little more interesting. All right, so we're back at the top of the song. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I start to want to play more triplets too, like instead of just da 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 da, mixed in with ba 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 da ba ba. I want to start going like da ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba, because that's more doable at those tempos than the da 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 da, which I can't sustain. And through all of this, I'm always thinking of when I was first starting out, I wanted to develop long lines like I heard in Martino and Benson, and Miskowski, and this type of players, Tal Farlow. Jimmy Rainey, Joe Pass from the early 60s. And so that was like the goal. And I, as I've said in other videos, I used to practice playing all eighth notes, but not at these tempos necessarily. But yeah, I'm always trying to achieve that. Like you hear Clifford Brown playing on a tune up tempo, Charlie Parker, saxophone players and horn players trying to create that. All right, here we go. 138. I guess we're on the bridge now, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, Well, I'm ahead. Okay, we're getting to the danger zone here, y'all. So 144, I think, was the next one. Maybe there was something in between on my old metronome, but so I'm not doing this forever. And it's funny, I noticed like today it's a little easier because the action on the guitar is in a good place. And you never know, like from day to day, honestly. I mean, we're dealing with, I think as I've been playing so much over the years, I'm way more sensitive to it than I used to be. And that's because I think I have a better sense of what me playing my best sounds like and what's required from the instrument itself to help me do that. And a lot of the time the instrument doesn't cooperate. And here it's real humid outside, but I've come into my office where it's less humid, and I've been adjusting the truss rod and doing all this stuff. I played a solo gig the other day outside for 3 hours and 90% humidity. And sometimes like when the action's a little higher, I kind of like the tone more, but just physically it gets harder to play. Anyway, it's never perfect, but today it's helping me while I'm doing this video. So 144, where are we? We're in the last day. Let's call it the top of the song. And it gets a little harder to think of it as 2 and 4 when we get fast like this, but 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as it gets faster, I start to realize that certain things, I have the universe of ideas and technical things that work starts to shrink, and sometimes I forget because I don't really play I feel like the music these days is not as fast. That what you're called upon to do. It's kind of more like quadruple timing, shreddiness at slower tempos as opposed to like trying to sustain eighth notes at 300. I feel like in the 90s that was a big thing. And that's what technique was to me. So I sort of forget that, until I'm actually playing, that doesn't work at that tempo. For me, it's like certain types of string crossing things. Like if I try to go across 3 strings, I can't do it as much. And then I start to do these ideas where I use a lot of pull-off, hammers-ons and pull-offs. Well, hammer-ons and pull-offs, yeah. And if I slow that down, I can't do it, but suffice it to say, I'm not picking every note. Like that is very hard to do for me at almost 300. Whereas at a normal tempo, I do that all day. So I have to kind of remember, don't do that. Or don't do it as eighth notes. Go. I can do that. What if I go da-da-da-da-da? Just ain't gonna work for me. Maybe there's another probably another fingering, but like I said, I don't do this as much anymore, but it's still kind of the basis of my technique. All right, let's go for the holy grail, y'all. So this is 152. This is what I always would shoot for back in the day. All right, so scary. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Wow, okay, I got through 2 choruses of that, and yeah, even in the midst of that, I started thinking about doing one of these diminished things, and I realized I played about 3 notes of it, and I was like, nope, like abort mission, I can't go, and yeah, like I said, I've heard people talk about that I have a good right hand, and that's how I developed it, was, moving things up gradually like that through the metronome. And like I said, over the years, I cut out a lot of, I'm sure you can see, I can't slow it down and demonstrate it honestly, but I just started mixing in the hammer-ons and pull-offs. And I remember it took me, it was a process to get the hammer-ons and pull-offs to be the same volume as the pick notes. I remember taking like a month or 2 off of gigs. When I got out of the Monk Institute, I moved back to New York, and I kind of started practicing to even those things out. And it messed me up for a while. It kind of messed up my timing. But it's just a question of, because, to make that, you really have to put more, my left hand got stronger, because to get the hammer-ons and pull-offs to be the same volume as the pick notes. It was hard. It was a process. And one other thing before I'm going to play, I have a track of me playing Cherokee with the track. I kind of feel like I did it better just then with just the metronome than I do with the track later. But it's a crapshoot, y'all, 300 beats per minute. With no, I don't have any, I'm just going right into this Hendrickson amp with a little bit of reverb. I don't have a lot of help. It's just me and the wood and the steel. But I was going to say, yeah, I did an instructional class, I think it was with Fred Dojo, and I was talking about how, I learned the caged system, and I talk about that in my book. And somebody had a question about how, okay, if you're doing these caged major scale shapes, how it interferes with your speed, or it can, one disadvantage is that it might interfere with your speed because it's kind of wonky. Sometimes you got 3 notes on a string, sometimes you got 2 notes on a string. And I realized that, my technical execution at those tempos is not really that related to the major scale shapes that I play. It's, the lines are very much more on the jazz vocabulary side. I'm not really running scales. I'm running, I guess, licks and patterns and arpeggios and trying to mix them up and not play the same thing over and over again. But as the tempo gets faster, there's fewer things that I can pull off, so it's probably more repetitive and less improvised than it would be at a slower tempo. But I'm just trying to survive, y'all. So anyway, I hope that was informative to you. And again, like I said, technique is how you execute your ideas. So it's not about how fast you can play. But the history of my engagement with the whole technical problem on the instrument was about, I came up in the 90s, so it was about how fast you can play Cherokee. And that's what I used to do, and I think that helped me develop a right hand that's pretty top of things. Much more so than my left hand. I feel like my left hand is lagging behind, and it's trying to think. And this thing is just like, let's go. So here's some Cherokee. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, technique is how well you execute your ideas, whatever they may be.